95. That's 1-800-883-5995. Call now.
In late 2002, Pat and Kevin Tillman were assigned to the 2nd Battalion of the 75th Ranger Regiment in Fort Lewis, Washington. At the beginning of the American invasion of Iraq in March, the brothers shipped out to the Middle East. Meanwhile, back home, an NFL team was talking to Pat's agent.
When he finished his first tour in Baghdad and came back, I called Patty and I said, Pat, let me ask you a question. Can you get out of the service? He says, yeah. He says, I can put my papers in tomorrow and I can be out. I said, well, the Seattle Seahawks are willing to pay you a ton of money to come. You could be set for life. He goes, Frank, I like what you have to say, but I made a commitment. And my commitment to the armed services was 3 years. And I want to finish my commitment.
Pat honestly believed that when he was finished with his 3-year commitment, he was going to come back to the NFL. It was his way of proving yet again, here's something that I can do. Here's another mountain I can climb.
In December of 2003, Tillman visited with his former Cardinals teammates in the locker room before a road game against the Seahawks.
I asked him if he would like to speak to the team. He wanted no part of that. He really didn't. He didn't want it to be about Pat Tillman. He just wanted to come and see some of the people that he wanted to see.
We embraced each other in the big bear hug, and I know that all of the other guys in the locker room gave him a similar bear hug. It was just so powerful, and I'll never forget that.
With his Rangers unit on standby to deploy back to the Middle East, Tillman enjoyed the company of friends.
I was up in Seattle, and me, Kevin, and Pat went to a bar, and Pat's sitting there drinking coffee with us, talking about what I'm doing and why I'm not going back to college. The things that meant the most to him were his friends and family, and he wanted the best for them. He wasn't too concerned about himself. He knew what he was going to do.
He told us a couple of things that were basically just to make us believe that he was safe there, because he knew that that's what we would want to hear. I think we all were not as worried because, first of all, it was Pat Tillman, and there's not a chance anything's going to happen to him.
The last time I saw Pat, he told me, he said, you know, I don't want to go back. And I said, well, why is that, Pat? He said, I think when we go back, we won't know who the enemy is. And that'll be a difficult situation.
In March of 2004, the Tillman Brothers Battalion was deployed to eastern Afghanistan, where they would conduct search and sweep missions against Taliban and al-Qaeda insurgents.
This terrain is unbelievably rugged. I mean, these mountains are massive, they are barren, the valleys are barren. It's hard to even find signs of life.
And this is in the heart of Taliban country. I mean, this is really bandit country, and they were sweeping sector by sector through this area, just almost inducing attacks on themselves so as to reveal the positions of the enemy.
The front line is anywhere and could be anywhere. So they are always worried about ambush. They are always worried about these small cells. The other thing, when you're in a country like that and people are fighting, they will do anything to protect their turf.
On April 22nd, the Tillman brothers were on a mission near the Pakistan border. According to reports, when a defective fuel pump in one of the unit's Humvees couldn't be repaired, a decision was made to divide the fighting unit into 2 groups, called Serial 1 and Serial 2.
Pat is in Serial 1 and Kevin is in Serial 2. Pat's serial is to go straight to the target village and begin clearing operations in Mana. Kevin's serial is to take the broken Humvee, go out to the highway, drop it off, then go back to the village and join the rest of the platoon.
Pat's group, Serial 1, traveled according to plan through a canyon, emerging safely on the other side. But when Kevin's group, Serial 2, realized that the terrain was too rugged to move the Humvee out to the highway, they followed Serial 1's route into the canyon, where trouble awaited.
As they get inside, they hear an explosion. They look up the walls of the canyon, and they see incoming fire. At that point, they realize that they hadn't hit a landmine, that they were being ambushed from above. They see the Taliban attackers up on top of the canyon firing down. The amount of fire began to grow as Pat Tillman's group doubled back to try to relieve the pressure on their comrades stuck inside the canyon.
You can't go into any situation, no matter how much training you have, and know exactly what's going to happen. Everything changes once the gunfire starts.
During the firefight, Pat Tillman and a member of the Afghan militia in his unit were killed.
I cried for days. I absolutely cried for days. I couldn't get over it. We've all just conditioned ourselves to believe that Pat was unstoppable. You know, how could Pat Tillman be killed?
Mike Martz called me 5:30 in the morning and said, "Frankie, sitting down?" I said, "No, I'm just waking up. Pat was killed last night in Afghanistan." And the phone started ringing off the hook, and what I did was I left for 2.5 hours and just drove.
I got to school the next morning, and just before class began, my students said, "What happened?" And when I tried to when I tried to explain to them what was happening, that's when it hit me. And I to this day, I had to leave school.
My wife picked up the phone late that night and heard the news. And when she told me, it was complete disbelief. And I called up to Pat and Marie's, and Marie's dad answered. And, you know, I knew that it was true then. It was just devastating news. I mean,
Phoenix wept. I mean, literally. In fact, I remember the day that news came out, it poured in town, and I thought it was just a perfect reaction to what the city was feeling, because Pat was sort of infallible.
He's supposed to get out of the Army, he's supposed to then go into politics and become the President of the United States, or he's supposed to start his own company and become a CEO, or he's supposed to go back to school and get his PhD and teach people. The story's supposed to have an outstanding ending.
But the true story had yet to be told. It would be months before the facts of Pat Tillman's death emerged.
He had all the makings of a hero. It was probably so tempting to use that story in a way and say, look, he died heroically